The year was 1968. The rain had stopped just an hour before sunset, leaving the streets of San Francisco slick and shining under the dim glow of streetlights. Inside a privately owned boxing gym near the industrial waterfront, the air was thick with the smell of sweat, leather, and old ambition. Heavy bags swung in slow rhythm, ropes snapped against canvas. Somewhere in the corner, a small radio crackled with low jazz that no one was really listening to. The men inside that gym had come to work. They were fighters, real ones. Their knuckles were scarred, their noses crooked, their ribs permanently tender from years of punishment. This was not a place for demonstrations. It was not a stage. It was not Hollywood. And yet that evening, Hollywood had just walked through the door. No one noticed at first. Out he entered quietly, black training pants, simple black shirt, no entourage, no noise, no announcement. He closed the door gently behind him. Bruce Lee had already begun attracting attention in martial arts circles. A few television appearances, rumors of extraordinary speed, stories whispered in dojos and gyms across California. But to the men in this building, he was something else. He was an actor, and actors in their world did not fight. Across the room, beneath a single hanging bulb, a large man was finishing a round on the heavy bag. His punches were not flashy. They were brutal. Every impact sounded like a shovel striking wet cement. His name was Tony DeMarco, 29 years old, 6'2", 212 pounds of disciplined violence. A former national light heavyweight champion with a professional record of 28 wins and 0 losses. 20 of those wins by knockout. He had broken ribs. He had shattered orbital bones. He had ended careers, and he did not believe in myths. Tony noticed the silence first. The rhythm of the gym had shifted. The younger fighters had stopped mid-combination, their eyes drifting toward the entrance. Tony followed their gaze. He wiped sweat from his brow with the back of his glove and squinted. A small Asian man stood near the wall, observing. Not staring, not posing, just watching. Calm. Too calm. Tony removed his gloves slowly and let them drop onto the canvas with a dull thud. The room quieted. He walked toward the visitor, each step heavy but controlled. Bruce Lee did not move. And he did not adjust his stance. He did not look away. He simply watched the approach the way a mathematician studies a problem. Tony stopped 3 feet away. Up close, the size difference was undeniable. Tony's shoulders were wide enough to block the overhead light. His forearms were thick and veined from years of bag work. A thin white scar traced the edge of his left eyebrow. Bruce Lee stood relaxed, hands resting loosely at his sides. "You lost?" Tony asked. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. "I was invited," Bruce replied evenly. Tony's jaw tightened slightly. "Invited?" he repeated. "To do what?" A few of the fighters exchanged glances. Bruce's expression didn't change. "To talk," he said. Tony let out a short laugh. Talk?" He looked around the room as if sharing a private joke. "We don't do much talking here." A couple of the younger men chuckled nervously. Tony took one more step forward. "You're that movie guy, right?" he asked. "The fast hands, the kung fu?" "It's called gung fu," Bruce corrected calmly. Tony smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Whatever you call it," he said. "This isn't a movie set." The silence in the room thickened. Bruce nodded once. "I'm aware." Tony leaned closer. "Out there," he gestured vaguely toward the city beyond the gym walls. "You've got cameras, directors, stuntmen who fall down when you tell them to." He tapped his own chest lightly. "In here, nobody falls unless they're made to." Bruce's breathing remained steady. "Good," he said softly. "Then we understand each other." The answer was not what Tony expected. His smile faded. The fighters were fully watching now. No one pretended to train anymore. "You know what I think?" Tony continued. Bruce said nothing. "I think you're just an actor." The words hung in the air. Tony wasn't done. "I think people see your little demonstrations and believe you're dangerous, but they have never seen what a real punch feels like." He raised one thick fist, slowly. "This," he said, "is real." Bruce's eyes flicked briefly to the fist, then back to Tony's face. "Then show me," he said. A murmur rippled through the room. Tony blinked once, surprised. "You want me to hit you?" "If you feel it's necessary." The calmness was unsettling. Tony circled slightly now, testing distance. He was used to opponents shifting, tightening, preparing defensively. Bruce did none of those things. He simply adjusted his weight subtly, almost invisibly. "You know what your problem is?" Tony said. "You've never been tested." Bruce tilted his head slightly. "That depends on the test." Tony stopped directly in front of him again. "No choreography," he said. "No rehearsals." He lifted his right hand and lightly flicked Bruce's cheek with 2 fingers. Not a slap, not a punch, just enough to humiliate. A few fighters laughed. Bruce did not react. Tony leaned in closer. "You hit first, movie star," he said quietly. "Let's see if you're more than an actor." The room froze. The radio crackled faintly in the corner, suddenly sounding far too loud. Bruce Lee's eyes did not harden. They did not flare with anger. If anything, they softened. He inhaled once. Slow, measured. Tony rolled his shoulders. "Go ahead," he said. "Or are you waiting for someone to yell action?" A bead of sweat slid down Tony's temple. Bruce's hands remained loose at his sides. Then Tony made a mistake. He reached forward again, this time pressing 2 fingers firmly against Bruce's forehead and pushing lightly. A gesture meant not to injure, but to belittle, a visible display of dominance. The fighters leaned in. Someone whispered, "This should be good." Bruce's head moved back slightly with the pressure, but his feet did not shift. Tony smirked. "There it is," he said. "That's what I thought." For a fraction of a second, nothing moved. The air in the gym seemed to hold its breath. And then, Bruce Lee's right hand twitched, so small that only the sharpest eyes in the room even noticed. 5 seconds. That was all it would take. For a fraction of a second, the entire gym existed inside a vacuum. Tony's fingers were still pressed lightly against Bruce Lee's forehead. His smirk hadn't faded. The younger fighters were leaning forward, expecting either a shove or a retreat. They got neither. They never even saw the beginning. Bruce's right hand did not swing. It did not chamber. It did not pull back. It simply moved. A straight-line strike, no more than 6 inches of travel, shot forward like a steel rod released from tension. The knuckles drove into the soft hollow just above Tony's sternum. It's directly into the solar plexus. The sound wasn't loud, but the effect was immediate. Tony's smirk vanished as if erased. His diaphragm spasmed violently. The breath he had been holding collapsed out of him in a dry, shocked grunt. Before his brain could process what had happened, Bruce's left hand snapped upward. Not a wild hook, not a looping punch. A tight vertical fist, rising along the center line, cracking sharply against the underside of Tony's jaw. The impact snapped his head backward. His teeth clacked together. His vision flashed white. The gym was still silent. 2 seconds. Tony's instincts finally fired. He began to lift his hands. He tried to pivot into a counter right, but Bruce was already gone from where he had been. A subtle shift of angle, a half step to the outside. Tony's counterpunch cut through empty air. 3 seconds. Bruce's right leg moved next, not high, not flashy. A short, brutal, oblique kick slammed directly into the outside of Tony's lid knee. The joint buckled inward with a sickening twist. Tony's massive frame lost its foundation. His balance collapsed. 4 seconds. As Tony stumbled forward, desperate to regain footing, Bruce stepped in, not backward, forward. His palm shot out once more, this time striking Tony squarely in the nose with the heel of the hand. There was a sharp crack, not bone breaking, but cartilage shifting. Tony's eyes flooded instantly with tears as pain detonated across his face. 5 seconds, 212 pounds of undefeated champion crashed to the canvas. The impact shook dust loose from the overhead rafters. The heavy bag in the corner swayed slightly from the vibration. And then, Nothing. No cheers, no shouting, no celebration. Just the faint buzzing of the fluorescent light above. Tony lay on his side, one knee bent at an unnatural angle, one hand clutching his midsection as his lungs fought desperately to pull air back inside. His other hand pressed against his bleeding nose. He tried to inhale. His diaphragm refused. He coughed. But no sound came out. Bruce Lee stood over him, breathing evenly. His chest rose and fell in calm rhythm. He had not broken a sweat. The fighters around the ring did not move. One of them blinked repeatedly as if trying to reset his vision. Another muttered under his breath,
"Oh, what the hell?"
Bruce adjusted the cuff of his sleeve. Not hurried, not dramatic, just precise. Tony finally managed to suck in a ragged breath that sounded like paper tearing. He rolled slightly, trying to push himself upright. His knee failed him instantly. He collapsed back down with a dull thud. Bruce stepped back one pace, not retreating, simply creating space. The gym door creaked faintly as someone shifted their weight near it. No one had realized they had been holding their breath until now. The air rushed back into the room all at once. Tony groaned. His pride had been struck harder than his body. 5 seconds. That was all it had taken. From the moment his fingers left Bruce's forehead to the moment he hit the canvas. Across the room, an older man who had been watching from near the speed bag finally unfolded his arms. His name was Frank Calder, former heavyweight contender, trainer, owner of the gym. He had seen knockouts. He had seen flash knockdowns. He had seen men destroyed in single punches, but he had never seen anything like that. Frank walked forward slowly. The concrete floor echoed beneath his boots. Bruce turned slightly to face him. Their eyes met. "That wasn't boxing," Frank said quietly. Bruce shook his head once. "It wasn't meant to be." Tony coughed again, finally managing to drag air into his lungs. Rage flashed briefly across his face. He tried to stand again. His knee buckled once more. One of the younger fighters rushed forward instinctively to help him. Frank held up a hand. "Leave him," he said calmly. Not cruel, but controlled. Tony forced himself onto one elbow. He stared up at Bruce, disbelief and humiliation battling inside his expression. "You cheap-shot me," he rasped. Bruce looked down at him. "You told me to hit first." The words were not mocking. They were factual. Tony's jaw clenched. He knew. He had invited it. Frank stepped between them slightly, not in protection, but in assessment. He studied Bruce closely now, the relaxed shoulders, the quiet breathing, the absence of adrenaline tremor. "You've done that before," Frank said. "Yes." "How many times?" Bruce paused for a brief moment. "Enough." Frank glanced down at Tony again, the undefeated champion, 28-0. S now flat on his back in front of his own gym. Vic would have swung wide, one of the fighters whispered behind them. "Tony never swings wide," another muttered. Frank ignored them. He focused only on Bruce. "That kick," Frank said, "that wasn't meant to knock him out." "No. It was meant to end it." "Yeah." Tony finally managed to sit upright, supported by one of the younger fighters, despite Frank's earlier gesture. His nose continued to bleed steadily. His chest rose unevenly. His eyes were filled with something new now. Not anger. Recognition. Bruce had not attacked wildly. He had dismantled him, piece by piece, with efficiency. Frank looked at Bruce again. "Why are you really here?" he asked. The question carried weight. Bruce didn't answer immediately. He glanced around the gym once more, at the heavy bags, at the scarred fighters, at the silent room. "I came to learn," he said. Frank raised an eyebrow. "Learn what?" "How to survive," Bruce replied. A slight shift passed through the room. Tony coughed again, wiping blood from his lip. "You don't need to learn anything," he muttered bitterly. Bruce looked at him briefly. "Yes," he said quietly. "I do." Frank stepped closer. "What kind of survival are we talking about?" he asked. Bruce's expression changed slightly. Not fear, not concern, something deeper. "There are men who believe I should not be teaching," he said. Frank said nothing. They've sent warnings, Bruce continued. They won't send another. The gym felt colder. Tony stopped moving. Oh, Frank's voice dropped lower. How many? Bruce met his eyes. I don't know. Silence stretched. The earlier fight already felt smaller now, less important. Frank studied him carefully. You're expecting trouble? Yes. And you walked into my gym before that happens? Yeah. Why? Bruce answered without hesitation. Because speed wins a moment. He paused. But endurance wins a war. Frank stared at him for a long time. Across the room, Tony was finally helped to his feet. His knee trembled beneath him. He kept his eyes locked on Bruce. There was no laughter now, no jokes, no smirks, only understanding. Frank finally spoke. Come back tomorrow, he said. 6 a.m. Bruce nodded once. Frank leaned slightly closer. Oh, and next time, he added quietly, you won't be hitting first. Bruce's expression didn't change. I wouldn't expect to. The fluorescent light flickered faintly overhead. 5 seconds had changed everything. Bruce Lee returned the next morning at exactly 6. The streets were still dark. Fog rolled in from the bay, wrapping the industrial blocks in a gray silence that swallowed sound. The gym windows were fogged from the cold night air. Inside, only one light was on. Frank Calder was already there. No music, no fighters, no noise, just the faint hum of electricity and the distant drip of water from somewhere in the building. Bruce stepped inside and closed the door behind him. Frank stood in the center of the ring, barefoot, no gloves, no tape. You said you came to learn, Frank said. Yes. Frank tilted his head slightly. Yesterday you proved you can end a fight. Bruce said nothing. Frank stepped down from the ring. But ending one man, he continued, isn't the same as surviving many. Bruce's eyes sharpened slightly. They won't come one at a time, he said. Frank nodded. That was all he needed to hear. Over the next few minutes, Bruce spoke. Not dramatically, not emotionally, just facts. He had been teaching openly, not just Chinese students, Americans, black students, Latino students. He had broken tradition. Some older masters considered it betrayal. They had sent letters first, then messengers, then warnings delivered in person. Close your school, they told him. Or we will close it for you. Frank listened carefully. These men, he said. They're fighters? Yes. Good ones? Very. Frank exhaled slowly. And you plan to face them? Bruce didn't hesitate. Yes. Frank studied him. You're either the bravest man I've met, he said, or the most stubborn. Bruce allowed the faintest hint of a smile. Sometimes they are the same. Frank walked toward a heavy bag, but didn't touch it. Instead, he turned back toward Bruce. You're fast, Frank said. Faster than anyone I've seen. Bruce remained still. But speed fades, Frank continued, especially when ribs are cracked, when eyes swell shut, when you can't breathe. He stepped closer. You ever taken a real body shot? Yes. From a heavyweight? Bruce paused. Oh, no. Frank nodded once. Good. Without warning, Frank stepped in and drove a short, brutal hook directly into Bruce's ribs. The sound was dull, solid. Bruce's body reacted instantly. His muscles tightened. His breath escaped in a sharp exhale. But he did not step back. Frank hit him again and again. Measured, controlled. Not reckless. Each shot designed to test, not injure. Bruce absorbed them, adjusted, shifted angles. Sometimes he deflected slightly. Sometimes he let them land. 20 minutes passed that way. No crowd, no applause, just the rhythm of impact. Wood against flesh, breath against discipline. By the time Frank stepped back, Bruce's ribs were already darkening beneath his shirt. You didn't try to avoid all of them, Frank observed. No. Why? Bruce inhaled slowly despite the ache in his side. Because they won't miss. Frank nodded. For the first time, respect entered his expression fully. They trained like that for 19 days, before sunrise, after sunset. Frank attacked from angles Bruce wasn't used to. Boxers combinations, dirty clinch work, shoulder bumps, forearm smashes, head positioning inside tight space. Bruce adapted quickly, but more importantly, he endured. Split lip, bruised ribs, swollen forearms. On the 10th day, Frank caught him with a straight right that snapped his head sideways and sent him briefly to one knee. Bruce stood up immediately. Frank watched carefully. "You dizzy?" "A little." "You want to stop?" "No." Frank gave a short nod. "Oh, good." By the 15th day, Bruce was different. Still fast, still precise, but heavier somehow, not physically, mentally. He no longer flinched when punches grazed him. He moved through contact instead of away from it. On the 19th morning, Frank lowered his hands after a hard exchange. "They'll come soon," he said. Bruce didn't ask how he knew. He felt it too. The air before a storm. It was just after sunset 3 days later. Bruce had dismissed his students early. The school was quiet. Wooden dummies lined the wall. Mats freshly cleaned. Incense burned faintly in the corner. He stood alone in the center of the room, waiting. The door opened without knocking. 7 men stepped inside. They moved with purpose, no shouting, no threats. Just silence. The leader was older, gray at the temples, calm eyes. "You were warned," the man said in Cantonese. Bruce nodded slightly. "I listened." "You did not obey." Bruce's breathing remained steady. "I do not obey fear." The younger men spread out slowly. Angles, surrounding, testing space. Bruce shifted his stance subtly, not wide, not theatrical, balanced, ready. "You embarrass tradition," the older man said. "You mistake evolution for disrespect," Bruce replied. The first attacker moved, fast, straight punch toward Bruce's jaw. Bruce deflected, countered, palm strike to chin. The man dropped instantly. The second attacker rushed from the right. Low kick, elbow, body fold. He collapsed beside the first. The room erupted into motion. 3 at once now. Bruce pivoted, used angles, struck centerline, but one caught him with a glancing hook to the temple. His vision blurred for half a second. Another drove a knee into his thigh. Pain surged upward. Frank's voice echoed in his memory. "Speed wins a moment. Endurance wins a war." Bruce adjusted, closed distance, struck throat, low kick, back fist. One by one they fell, but not without cost. A fist split his lip. An elbow cracked against his ribs, the same ribs Frank had hardened for 19 mornings. Pain flared white-hot. He kept moving. The older leader stepped forward last. Measured, experienced. He attacked without rage, clean, technical. They exchanged strikes in tight quarters. Bruce felt fatigue now. Felt the weight of numbers, but he remembered every lesson. Absorb, adjust, continue. The final exchange lasted seconds. A deflection, a sharp strike to the throat, a sweep to the ankle. The older man fell backward onto the mat. Silence returned. Bruce stood alone in the center of the room, breathing heavier now, blood on his knuckles, lips swollen, ribs aching. 7 men lay scattered around him, some groaning, some unconscious, none standing. The leader looked up at him from the floor. "You have changed," he said weakly. Bruce nodded once. "Yes." He stepped back. The storm had passed, but outside, sirens began to wail in the distance. Not for him, but close enough to remind him this world was bigger than one fight, bigger than 7 men. And somewhere, word would spread. The door remained open. Cold air drifted in. Bruce stood there, steadying his breath. The war wasn't over. It had just begun. 3 weeks later, the atmosphere inside the exhibition hall felt different. Charged, electric. The posters outside still read the same, but now the whispers had changed. Some had heard about the gym incident. Some had seen the bruises on Bruce's ribs. Some had noticed the way he walked, calm but heavier. Frank Calder stood in the back of the room, arms folded, watching, waiting. Across the ring stood the champion boxer, confident, smirking, gloves laced tight. "You're just an actor," he repeated into the mic, making sure the crowd heard it clearly this time. The audience laughed. Bruce didn't. And he stepped through the ropes slowly. No theatrics, no anger, just stillness. The referee gave final instructions. Exhibition rules. Controlled contact. The bell rang. The boxer moved first. Fast jab. Bruce slipped it. Another jab. Bruce didn't counter. He observed. The boxer grew bolder. 3-punch combination. Left hook to the body. Bruce absorbed it. Barely blinked. Frank's training echoed in his bones. 4th punch. Bruce stepped inside the arc. His movement was almost invisible. A blur. A direct straight punch shot forward from inches away. Not wide, not flashy, just precise. It landed on the boxer's jaw with a sharp crack. The entire exchange lasted less than 5 seconds. The champion staggered backward, eyes wide, legs unstable. He didn't fall dramatically. He simply realized, too late. Bruce didn't chase him, didn't taunt him, didn't smile. He just stood there, balanced, present. The referee stepped in. The crowd was silent for a full second, then exploded. Not because a boxer had been hit, but because something had shifted. The narrative was broken. The actor wasn't acting. The boxer slowly steadied himself, touching his jaw in disbelief. He looked at Bruce differently now. No smirk, no arrogance, just understanding. 5 seconds. That was all it took. After the bell rang to close the exhibition, the boxer approached him quietly. "You're not just an actor," he said. Bruce shook his head gently. "I never said I was." No anger, no victory speech, just truth. Frank, watching from the back, gave the smallest nod. The lessons had held. Speed, endurance, silence, and the willingness to evolve. Outside, reporters would debate it. Some would say it was staged. Some would say it was luck. But the people in that room knew what they felt. Respect. Because real power doesn't shout. It doesn't boast. It doesn't need applause. It simply arrives. And 5 seconds later, it leaves no doubt. If you enjoyed this story of discipline, evolution, and silent strength, subscribe for more untold Bruce Lee moments that history almost forgot. Comment below, was it speed or preparation that won the fight? And share this with someone who still thinks he was just an actor. Because legends aren't born, they're built.